What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 138, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meath, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends and co-host Roffle and Corbett. Guys, it's time for our regularly scheduled conversation about patch notes. How are you guys doing tonight?
I've lost count. For the Xth time, and in final time, Wild is surely saved, right? Like, we got a balance patch. We got a ban in Wild, so that means the format is fixed. Everything's all better. And nobody will be complaining moving forward.
Look, we got the ban that I was demanding, so I'm absolutely thrilled and over the moon. And Wild is indeed saved, Roffle. I think you've perfectly summed it up.
All right, listeners out there, I'm going to need you to clip that moment that Corb just had so that you can play it back and lord it over him as we get into the conversation today. But yeah, just yet another balance patch. Yet another, 8 or 9 cards changed. And so we're going to run through them really, really quickly. And then we're going to talk about the big news of Crimson Clergy getting banned. But we're going to leave that for the end because I feel like if we start with it, we're going to forget about all these other cards. So we should kind of get those out of the way and then sort of talk about Clergy. So let's just dive into it. It seemed like Standard was in a pretty good spot. And so they said they didn't want to, do a whole lot of disruption. They were making a bunch of small adjustments. And then they still ended up changing 9 cards. So I don't know what that means for the future balance changes, but let's dive into the nerfs first. Pure Paladin was terrorizing Standard, so they nerfed 3 Paladin cards. They nerfed the Purator from 5 mana to 6. I don't believe he was seeing a whole lot of play in Wild at all, and so this shouldn't really impact any Wild decks, but I think this was the best card in Standard Pure Paladin, so it seemed like a pretty obvious target for a change. Feast and Famine. So this was a spell that you've probably never seen before in Wild until some of the standard tech got leaked into Wild. This was a 1-mana Rockbiter, basically. Give your hero +3 attack this turn, Mana Thirst 4, give your hero Lifesteal as well. So they wanted to nerf that Doomhammer Rockbiter combo, and so they nerfed this from 1 mana to 2 to kind of be more in line with Rockbiter weapon. Kind of completely makes sense. Unrelated, maybe playable in Even Paladin now, so that you can do the Doomhammer Rockbiter stuff in Even. No, all right, Corb's shaking his head. I had to try. Come on. And then the one change for all the Paladin cards that probably actually does impact our format, which is Disco Maul, going from 2 mana 2/2 weapon to a 3 mana 3/2. But still has the same death rattle of giving your friendly minions +1/+1, improved while playing minions. So this primarily sees play in Mech Paladin and Wild. Can actually get pretty juiced with the Mech Warper and Galvanizer discounts, and it actually seems like a pretty good card in Mech Paladin. So the question is, at 3 mana, does it still see play?
I would be skeptical. It was quite good in Mech Paladin because Mech Paladin spams so many minions. But the thing about Mech Paladin is that it doesn't really want to spend mana. So asking it to spend 2 mana on a Disco Mole was already kind of what are you getting at here? But then now asking it to spend 3 mana, it does give it an extra 2 damage. That's not really why you're playing this card. I had this played against me. I think somebody got +8 or 9 worth of stats even after the nerf. So you can certainly get it to pop off, but because it was happening, a turn or 2 slower, I just cleared the minion because I had the capacity to do so at that point and probably won the game. So, yeah, I think it gets significantly worse because the whole point of Mech Paladin is, again, develop minions without spending mana. So I'm sure people will try it. Could still be worth running, but certainly won't be as big of a powerhouse as it was prior to the nerf.
I think it'll be completely unplayable in Mech Paladin. I think the card's dead outright, so yeah. Take it out. It'll probably take a long time for people to actually take it out of the decks. I know, things get a bit stuck.
Yes, Mech Paladin is also kind of one of the top 3 or 4 bot decks as well. So those lists usually take a while to slow down, and then it's not just because bots are playing them, but that develops a lot of stats on HS replay that then people copy, and so there will be a time where it'll be run and probably not very good, but people keep running it because other people are running it, kind of at the self-perpetuating cycle.
Yeah. Also, kind of okay with Mech Paladin getting hit a little bit because I think this was a very good card in that deck, and I don't know, something about Mech Warper Vomits. I'm okay with them being a little bit worse in the format. So I think pluses all around for that. All right, we got a couple more nerfs here. Let's talk about Lady Sitheno. So I think the last time we talked about a balance patch, which was like yesterday, we talked about how we were a little bit sad that they were nerfing Predation for like Sitheno's sins. It looks like people were still finally, you know, people were still not happy with her presence in the format, and so it looks like they really wanted to finally address her. Corb, you're gonna have to actually answer this because I don't really see this card in Wild ever. Does a change to one attack really make that big of a deal when you're playing stuff like Rowdy Fan and all that?
Yeah, it's a huge deal. I mean, the card was already very weak in like Outcast Demon Hunter, and the sort of when it's a support piece, it was really quite bad and should have already been cut all the time. In Spell DH, like the OTK deck, that deck is also not very good anymore. People are very people were suggesting that you could just play like Crazed Alchemist, and then it basically becomes just like a 1-mana nerf instead. But no, it's really quite bad. So this is kind of just a good excuse to cut it. Like people have just been very resistant to try other things in Demon Hunter because I think Sitheno feels really good a lot of the time. Like it's nice to have that that feeling that you can always deal infinite damage and win against things like Control Priest or whatever. But it's been bad. So we'll see how long it takes for this to trickle down. But I mean, in Wild, less relevant. Not really a ton of Sitheno Demon Hunter stuff going on in Wild anyway.
All right. The next nerf was to Hunter. It seemed like it was a little bit of a preemptive nerf. Hope of Kael'Thalos. So this is the legendary weapon. Used to be a 6-mana 4/2. Whenever your hero attacks, give your minions +1/+1 wherever they are. I think this is something we used to play in Beast Hunter for like a hot minute before we got Stranglethorn Heart. But it's been nerfed from 4 attack to 3 attack. Again, this was never really played in our format, after we got new toys, and so not really super impactful in our format. And then the other one is Pozic, Audio Engineer, 4-mana 5/4, that added the 2 bots to your opponent's hand. Death Battle, summon them for yourself. Got tuned down from 5 attack to 4. This was probably just like the strongest all-around neutral legendary in Standard, and so they were just kind of toning it down.
I will say about Pozic, like, if what they're reporting is true, which I believe because like the card is kind of like sneaky good. It was probably the case that like it should have been played more in Wild than it was, especially in something like, I know even Death Knight fell off, but that would be a deck that would make good use of it. I think maybe there just weren't great homes for it at the time being, because you probably can't find room for it in Even Shaman. But like if a card is performing that well, like we see Astalors everywhere, why weren't we seeing more Pozics before the nerf? Because even in Standard, where it's apparently super busted, people aren't playing enough of it.
I mean, they honestly, well, like, Wild is much more synergistic in general. There's less, like aggro good stuff piles as much. Like you said, even Death Knight, really good example of a deck that is using it because it's just a pile of stuff. Whereas, like, even Shaman, not so much. In Wild, it probably actually could have been maybe very solid in the Reno decks. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that was ever really tried. But it wouldn't have been surprising to me if Reno Priest, which actually, like, fights for board quite well in the early game, could have been using it, but I don't think it really got that much attention. Yeah,
that was kind of what I had in mind. Even just like a Reno Paladin pile of cards would love something like this, but I never I saw people experimenting with that deck, but never this card.
For what it's worth, I was one of the early adopters of this in Death Knight. I'm gonna shout that out. Like I think this card was very good in that deck. Even Death Knight wasn't very good though, so you never saw it. Right? Same with like I played it in like Even Paladin and things like that, and it was okay, but I don't know if I'm still gonna run it at 4 attack. It's just really funny, people trying to dump the 3/3s out of their hand, where it's like probably shouldn't be doing it. I actually really like this card as a concept, kind of side tangent, because it is like this little weird tension of like, oh, I should play this, but it's like really bad for me to play these 3/3s out of my hand, and so by playing the 3/3s, the aggro deck gets to keep progressing their game plan. It's a really weird tension, and I kind of like it, and it never really felt, I don't know, maybe somebody who didn't play a bunch of Standard never really felt bad to play against. And so I don't know if Standard players felt the same about that.
I don't know either, but I agree with you pretty wholeheartedly that like cards that make for interesting decision points make for interesting games. So Even if Pazik is good, I think he's good in an interesting way, especially like you talked about with like, the decision point. Do I clear it? Do I play a minion? How that affects your curve, and like you're having a hard time spending it because like it comes down on 4. If they, were on the play, that means you're having to probably float a mana to like get the 3/3s out of hand. So like there are a lot of interesting points of tension, like you mentioned, that this card presents, but it seems like it was just performing a little bit too well. So I don't know. I guess we weren't really seeing a whole lot of it anyway, but I think it is a really cool and interesting card. So bummer.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Astalor because it maybe is a bit of a similar story there, where I know, well, it probably wasn't as played as Astalor or necessarily quite as powerful, but Pozic was very powerful, and it's also a card that I think a lot of people really liked and sort of didn't want to see nerfed, and it still can feel satisfying. But Astalor's probably at a very appropriate power level right now, and I think Pozic will be similar. Like I think it'll still be quite popular without being, borderline Drekthar on 4. Like there are some decks where if you slam this on curve, it was very, very, very strong.
Yeah, and I think where it's probably strongest, to your point there, Corb, is the aggro decks, right? So the attack is going to make a big difference there, where you're not just like, because you can't clear it without summoning the minions, you're not just automatically taking 5 after it comes down the next turn. So yeah, I think that's a fair point.
All right, let's hop into these buffs real quick. Roffle's favorite topic, of course. Let's start with Fiddlefire Imp. This was the 3-mana 3/2 demon, Warlock Mage dual class, Battlecry, add a random fire Mage and fire Warlock spell to your hand. Getting an extra health tacked onto it, I don't think is going to make that big of a difference. I've seen a couple sentiments of like, if it got bumped to 2, like it'd probably be a really good Quest Mage card, and therefore I'm very glad it did not get bumped to 2. So, yeah. Now, Remixed Dispensobot. So this was a 4-mana 4/4 mech that had the random effects that would change in your hand. The one that would give you 2 mechs, or 2 secrets, or 2 coins, or 2 random frost spells, I believe was the last option. It is now a 3-mana 3/3 with all of those same options. Is it being a mana cheaper? Maybe something that's intriguing now for, say, a mech mage, or maybe even like a quest mage. Getting coins or random frost spells seems like not the worst thing.
Yeah, it's certainly more tempting. I played this card when it was 4 mana, and honestly, just the remixed aspect of this card is probably the most limiting factor for it, especially if you're talking about something hyper specific like a quest mage, where yeah, you probably want to, even the frost spells they're bound to be bad, right? There's some expensive frost spells that you really don't want, like a deep freeze, where really you just want the coins. And if you're looking for one specific mode of this, you're going to be disappointed a lot of the time, and it's going to get stuck in hand and feel very bad. The same thing with the mech mage. If you're probably okay with the coins because you want to cheat some mana, you're probably happiest with the double mechs. There's some really bad mechs in Wild, and so like, is it better than some of the other options that you have, like just slamming a gorilla bot and knowing what you're going to get as much of the time as possible? I don't know. I'm having played some of the remix cards, I am reminded of how frustrating that type of effect can be.
I think this is actually quite strong in Mech Mage. Not like I've played a ton of Mech Mage, but just some more conceptually. Yeah, like, I think it's a solid reload. The coins, being able to get Gaia out super early is very impactful. Getting the mechs is obviously fine. So I just think like it's one of the more well-rounded remix cards in general, where you're kind of happy with just about everything. Maybe the secrets in the deck like that are a bit sad. And then Quest Mage, I mean, if you get coins, you kind of just win. Like, you kind of just win the game a lot of the time if you manage to get this down with the coins activated. So, it might very well be quite good in Quest Mage, which is another thing that I'd rather not think about and not really try personally.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if it makes the best. Like, I don't know if it's consistent enough to make the like best 30 for Quest Mage, but if you're playing like a Renathal version, I could totally see it fitting in. Just because like they play a bunch of bad cards anyway, so this has to be better than some of the bad cards that the 40 card Quest Mages play. I'll be interested to see if it actually like finds a home in Wild, but I don't think people are going to experiment with it, so I'd be surprised. All right, the last card that was buffed, Rhythm Dancer Risa. So this is a Rogue Demon Hunter dual class. Was the 5 mana 3/5 with Rush. After your hero attacks, return this to your hand and then set its cost to 1. So it got buffed from 5 to 4. So now 4 mana 3/5 Rush feels kind of on rate with some of the other cards that have been printed in the past year or so. Now also with the upside. So is there a home for this card? I would have said Odd Rogue previously, but now it is 4 mana instead of 5. I mean, it seems like it has upside, but it just doesn't seem like it has a home, right? I don't know.
I don't know where you would play this. I played this in a deck with Curtis, the hero, and even then she felt pretty bad, right? Like, it's just 1 mana is a lot. It turns out when you're trying to kill somebody and it doesn't go face. I think that it's a really cool and satisfying card to play, but it's not winning you games, and it's probably not top 30 card even in a Reno deck of either class, which you really don't want to be playing anyway. So it's just like this card really struggling to find a home in both formats, it seems. And just not like a super powerful card to begin with, especially in Rogue. A lot of the decks that want something like a 1 mana 3/5 Rush don't want to be daggering a whole lot, because that doesn't really fit the Miracle Rogue game plan. And then I don't know, like, Demon Hunter doesn't really care about the board in both formats because it just slams brutes and wallopers and Wild, and then just has the lifesteal AoE in Standard, so like it just lets the board build up and then deals with it later.
Yeah, I don't know if Rhythm Dancer Rizza with Rush is gonna cut it. Would you guys have preferred to have seen Chithem Dancer Chizza with Charge?
Yes. Yes.
No.
I think that would be fun. I think that'd be much better. Yeah. I don't really like this card's so bad the way it is. So, honestly, Even Rogue, good shout. Like, probably like by far the best home for it. But Even Rogue goes even one beyond the LPG rule. Even Rogue is in its own universe.
Yeah, that was not meant to be taken seriously.
I've played Even Rogue before, I've tried it. Because in my mind, the 1 mana dagger is just so like it's one of the best tempo hero powers, but you end up taking just infinite damage when you're trying to like clear everything up in these board battles.
Yeah.
Wait, that deck gets hip hop or whatever it's called, harmonic hip hop.
Harmonic.
You got Nitro Boost Poison, and now you have this card.
Yeah, You know what you can do with those cards though is attach them to a Kingsbane, so instead of just 2 turns, you get them permanently.
It's a good idea.
Yeah,
Someone should try that.
It's probably the best idea that we've heard so far. Okay, hear me out. So now that nobody's playing Outcast Demon Hunter in Wild, that's not Questline. But what if we played it with Halveria and some rushers like that? No? Okay. All right.
You'd have to play Halveria in your deck. And
all right, look, I think Halveria is actually really good. I just don't think that the Outcast Demon Hunter is better than the Questline Outcast Demon Hunter, and so nobody plays it. All right, I just want to don't diss my girl Halveria. She's a very good card, okay? All right, whatever. Let's get to the meat of the episode. Everybody's here to listen to us talk about Crimson Clergy getting banned in Wild. Infamous dev comment, okay? Crimson Clergy is a key enabler in a combo deck with play patterns beyond what we want for the format. All right, hot take time. Let it all out. Corb, I know you had some hot takes on Twitter, so I'm going to let you go first. How satisfied are you with this ban in Wild? Our 5th ever ban, 6th ever ban? I've lost track at this point.
I made Twitter posts, but I don't actually care very much. Like, I kind of went on. Like, I'm sorry, Meow, for giving you maybe the false impression.
Dude,
here.
You set me up and everything, and you just let me.
I
fall.
know. Like, it was just kind of my reaction is sort of like, like why? I don't really. It wasn't what I was maybe making commentary on, suggesting like I wasn't really caring or in favor of the ban, and so I did kind of feel like I was a little bit on my own on that one. But then by the time the ban came around, it seems like a lot of people have felt similarly. Like once the patch eventually got announced, like the thing with Clergy is that, yeah, like the whole drawing your entire deck thing is very toxic. Turn 3 potential OTK is very toxic. But I barely saw it because the deck was terrible. Like I saw it for the first 48 hours, and then it kind of just like completely disappeared for me. Very low impact. It's also very similar to like another deck that's in the format with Tony Druid. Like they have highly similar play patterns and APM draw entire deck and combo off issues. So it didn't really seem consistent. And it was very different than, I don't know, it just felt like a ban or a nerf for Wild that it's probably the first time where I was kind of like, I wouldn't have done that, or like I don't quite seem to understand the vision, or like it just seemed a little strange. Like even when I've disagreed with bans before, like I disagreed with Tome Tampering over Soul Barrage, it was still going after the right deck, obviously, with Disco Lock, right? So that made sense. But with this one, I probably would have just let it roll because, again, like I am at the point where we talked about this with the Twig episode, where I think there is such nonsense going on in the format right now. There are so many non-games, there's so much mana cheating that anything that Priest was doing with this didn't seem like an outlier. Like if OTK Priest pops off and kills you on turn 5, is that any different than Quest Demon Hunter summoning 5 brutes and playing 4 brutes and 2 mana burns on turn 4? You know, like there are similar non-games happening everywhere. And for a deck that was this bad that I think people who were dropping and weren't playing that much, I probably wouldn't have done a ban here. But I also, like I said, I don't actually care that much because I don't think the deck was very fun either way. It's just a little bit confusing.
Yeah, even down ladder where you might expect to see more of those types of like very hyper specific but less successful combo decks, because we talked like I think just last episode about how there is a portion of player bases of the player base that really likes this type of combo and this style of play of like play your whole deck in one turn. Even there, like it was pretty non-existent in my experience. I think the week leading up to the ban, I think I lost to it maybe once or twice. And I play greedy decks a lot that get obliterated by this type of thing. That said, I think that I'm less of the mind that like a ban wasn't warranted. I'm just confused as to, like you said, the inconsistency between the play pattern of this deck and Tony Druid, which essentially does the same thing. Like maybe I think the capacity for the Priest deck to combo early, or like the low end of what the combo could do was maybe earlier in the game. But like Druid is a little bit more consistent and can do it maybe like a turn or two slower, but it does it that turn or two slower more games, I think, than the Priest does it, at their potential of a turn 3 combo or whatever it is that like they can do, but doesn't often do. So it's like I don't know that if play pattern is the reason, which I think it is, I don't see a significant difference between those two decks. I think that they're both bad. They're not winning a whole lot of games, but like they're hyper polarizing and pretty unfun to play against, and like almost have identical play patterns, right? You empty your own deck and then just chain a set number of spells until the opponent's hero explodes. It's like if corporate asked me to tell the difference between the two, they're the same. So that's the confusion that I have, is like the inconsistency between why target one and not the other. I assume it's because of like the low end turn potential that the Priest had compared to the Druid, but like I mentioned, the consistency of the Druid makes it probably on average hitting the combo turn about the same time. And like there's a shared card between the two that if you were going to ban something, you could ban Funnel Cake, and like that probably takes both of those offline, or at least certainly takes the priest deck down even further, which would just make people stop playing it and like forces the Tony Druid to like do goofy Twig Sphere stuff again that like feels really bad after that nerf. So it's like, I don't know. I think Funnel Cake is maybe the target that I would go for if I were to choose a ban. I understand why they went after the deck, but I guess don't agree with the inconsistent targeting between the two because, like, honestly, neither deck is fun to play against, but neither deck is popular because neither deck is good.
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of the sentiments that you guys have about being confused by the inconsistency. I'm not displeased though that they went after the deck, similar to what Roffle was saying. And I do wish they went after the Druid deck. I just don't think. I think that going after the Priest deck, I don't think that Clergy was the thing that you were supposed to hit. I don't even know that Funnel Cake was what you were supposed to hit. And this is might sound biased because it's me, but like I think the problem would have been Radiant Elemental if you were going to nerf a specific card in the Priest deck. That's what you would have hit. I think they just didn't because they had it in the core set last year and they might bring it back to the core set, and so they probably don't want to do that, and that's me very much projecting. But like I think the Druid issue is like Gloop. It's not Funnel Cake, it's not really the Auctioneer, but like I think there are problems in both of those decks. If you wanted to hit one card to hit both of them, I guess it's Funnel Cake. But I also echo the sentiment of like I don't understand why they hit one and not the better, more popular, more consistent version of it, even if it's comboing on turn 4 instead of turn 3.
Yeah, I think I had something that I've been thinking about throughout the week, but failed to mention just now that I agree that I don't think that in either deck Funnel Cake is the problem. I think it's just an elegant ban to the two. I agree that Floop is the major enabler in Tony Druid, and you know probably previously was, even with like the Twig Sphere shenanigans, was like amplifying that problem. And I think that Radiant Elemental is probably the bigger enabler in the Priest deck. I think that the reason why those maybe dodge is for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's like it's two bans, then you get into this cascading like decision point of, well, what is unique about these decks that requires bans when, you know, like we just discussed, they aren't successful. What about the play patterns of, you know, Questline Demon Hunter, of Quest Mage? Like you could go down the line of like, you know, these aren't that specific play pattern issues that that desperately need addressing when there are a lot of problems in the format. So that's like one issue. If you're going to address old cards, like you need to take a look at broadly across the format, I think. And also just like those, you know, when we're talking about Wild, they seem hesitant, except in rather extreme cases, to touch on cards like that have like nostalgia attached to them, that have previous decks that weren't as problematic, that did rely on those cards. So something like a Radiant Elemental, you know, people don't want to lose like Inner Fire combo Priest just because of you know, this new combo that is really cropped up, you know, at least in part due to Clergy and Funnel Cake. And the same thing for like, should you know, goofy greedy Reno Druid decks suffer, or should Celestial Alignment Druid suffer? Yes, because of you know, the current combo using Floop's Gloop. You know, those are questions that like have typically been, the answer has been no from the dev team in the past, that like decks that have existed, or cards that are foundational to other, you know, historic past decks tend to take a lot to get nerfed or changed.
Yeah, my general impression, and this isn't based on any like inside commentary that anyone gave or anything, is that the dev team obviously wants to listen to the Wild community and sort of needs feedback, I think, on like what the community in general finds as the issues, and kind of wants to hear and takes probably like guidance, right, about like what people are screaming about and what people need, you know, think needs to be banned, because they're just like probably not quite on the pulse as much as they are with the primary constructed format standard. So I think in this case, Clergy was something that people were very upset about, or like there was a lot of Reddit attention, Twitter attention, content creator attention in the very early going of the mini set about clergy and how it seemed like it was a problem. And it feels, again, not based on inside talks or anything, but it feels a bit like a decision was made. Like, people complained, they saw the complaints, they heard them, we're gonna ban it, and it sort of like didn't quite reevaluate, or there wasn't like another check-in like, hey, are we actually gonna do this? Like, why are we doing this and not doing this? So I think that's kind of what happened. But in general, like, I think that the bans should be pretty much reserved at this point for the very, very insane stuff, the tier S, the super broken things like Disco and Twig. And this doesn't quite fit that. So like, I think the problem is, like, if you start going after stuff like this, it's like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing Tony? And this keeps raising questions. So I don't know. Like, I think Wild requires very light touch at this stage, and a very, very obvious touch. And I just think that the messaging probably got a little bit confused with this particular deck and card.
Yeah, I mean, this felt like they locked in a change like day 2 or 3, and they were like, okay, the next time we do a balance patch, we probably want to address this, because that's what people were complaining about like the first week, and like you said, they probably didn't check back in to see if it really warranted it. Because if you know the criteria that we've kind of set for changes in the past, like play pattern, popularity, power, this like has the play pattern issue, but like none of the other two, and so it's really weird that it got nerfed, or I guess banned, not nerfed. But that being said, like, I appreciate the sentiment of like stepping in when and addressing like problematic things before they get really good and popular and oppressive, right? For like the longest time, Flurgle Talks was like a really gross play pattern thing, but the Shaman deck wasn't powerful enough to like really warrant complaining about, and now we're kind of stuck with Flurgle Talks, and so like I kind of am okay with it at some point, but I also don't think that they hit the right card, which is like, we've already touched on that a little bit. It also, like I tweeted about this a little bit earlier, it feels a little bit weird about like Overheal's just like never going to be a thing now that Crimson Clergy is kind of banned, which is a little unfortunate for Wild, but
it is strange that we have a ban to a card that is in the core set.
Yeah,
because
kind of
never rotating.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, or if it's meant to be this foundational piece, then like, what are we doing? There's no like timeline, which is unique.
Yeah. That is, it is unique and weird, and especially on a brand new mechanic too. Like, this is unprecedented for a wide variety of reasons. Yeah, no, that's a great point.
All right. I think the best thing that come out of all of this, or maybe the worst thing, is the messaging that they used for this ban of combo deck with play patterns beyond what we want for the format, because now people are going to use that for every deck that they don't like.
Yep.
I've seen it a lot, specifically about Quest Mage already, of Chaining Ice Fox is definitely play patterns for what they do want for the format, because that's not banned.
It's going to be the Leroy Jenkins copy pasta all over again.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be good or bad for the Twitch meta, but I can already see it. I already have seen it in complaints. Thank goodness that we had a Reddit blackout, because I feel like it would have been all over Reddit too. So thank God we had a Reddit blackout for a while. But
yeah, that's where it would have started for sure. And fortunately, I'm splitting time on YouTube now, so I get fewer of the Twitch memes.
What do you mean? That's like the only good part about Twitch is the Twitch memes. All right. Any last comments you guys want to have about the ban? I feel like we've kind of touched on it, and to a good point here with our confusion as well as.
No, I think I would just like echo your last point. I think their intent and their heart was in the right place. I think they just maybe they maybe missed the mark a little bit on it in terms of like getting an accurate pulse of player sentiment, and the more, not so much player sentiment, because I think this was very much a player sentiment change, just more like an accurate like picture of the metagame going into the weekend, because like we had all said, the deck had fallen off into oblivion.
Yeah. And it probably is a good lesson for the future, right? For the community, right? Sometimes you complain a lot about something in the first 48 hours, and it's like,
It-
maybe.
I've been trying to get that message across for years now, Corbett. It's not going. People aren't going to learn about that.
Okay. All right. I tried.
Yeah, and I will say, like, 2/3 of us are happy they addressed the deck in some capacity. I'm sure that like there is a large portion of the player base that is like, happy that this deck is gone. So I think that like it will be fairly well received. But yeah, I think that maybe it'll leave more engaged portions of the community, like a lot of people in our audience, perhaps a little bit confused. But I think overall it'll still be a fairly well received change for the like broader wild community at least.
I just want to clarify. I'm not like I'm not angry or mad about the change. It's more it kind of matches my general feelings on Wild right now.
Just indifferent.
just whatever.
Yeah. All right. So this is normally the point of a balance patch episode where I ask you guys general feels about Wild post patch, but really nothing changed. And so I feel like our feelings haven't changed. But yeah, 10 card change. The Clergy ban. What is this? Our 6th ban? I've like lost track at this point. There's been so many. Stealer, Demon Seed, Tome Tampering, Clergy, Switcheroo. 5, right?
There's a test subject briefly.
5.5.
Oh yeah, 5.5.
Something about these Warlock and Priest classes, right? Yeah. Interesting change, but history made. First core set card, first brand new card, new mechanic rather. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for joining me on the short balance patch episode review. We'll be back next week for some content. Corbin, Roffle, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for talking Wild. Thanks for talking Crimson Clergy. Let the people know where they can find you guys and your content.
Yeah, as mentioned earlier, you can find me streaming on both Twitch and YouTube at Roffle.
You can find me at Corbett on Twitch or at Corbettgames on Twitter and YouTube.
You guys can find me at Get Me Out on all those platforms. Thanks again for everybody that listens week after week. Appreciate y'all, and we'll see you guys again next time. Later.